He spent his last credits on clothes for a frozen alien widow, then invited her aboard his ship. The lower concourse of Sorella Spire looked more like a forgotten service tunnel than part of the city's gleaming public architecture. The air smelled faintly of coolant and wet steel. Condensation ran in thin threads down the chrome support beams, dripping onto cracked tiles that had once been polished. Overhead, transport rails whispered as capsules shot past without slowing. Down here, nobody hurried for anyone else. Seth Draven stood still among the motion. He'd come down here after finishing a long cargo scheduling shift for the Sable Finch. His mid-range hauler docked on level 17C. The Finch was his only real home, though the registry listed it as an independent logistics vessel contracted to 3 minor guilds. He kept its routes efficient and quiet, avoiding politics and passenger runs. It was a simple mission: move goods, stay invisible, pay off the last of his wartime debts. He preferred the lower concourse at this hour. Few crowds, no chatter. The stillness helped him think. His nerves, trained years ago in the war's logistics division, still defaulted to alertness. He tracked movement out of habit, eyes flicking between vent columns, service drones, and exits. Nothing about this place surprised him anymore. Until she moved. A flicker of gold near a heat vent made him stop. He thought it was scrap foil at first. Then it shifted, and he saw her. She crouched with her knees pulled to her chest, spine pressed against the vent grill, naked and trembling. Skin like warm metal dulled by frost. Jet black hair clung in ropes to her back and shoulders. Her lips were split and pale. Every shallow breath shuddered out like it cost her. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking at people, just staring straight ahead, eyes half glazed, as if watching something far away. Commuters passed in loose arcs around her without slowing. No one spoke. No one met her eyes. The station system had flagged her. He could see the faint red marker from the overhead scanner flickering on her collarbone. Unregistered. It meant no citizen record, no credits, no rights. Not hunted, just invisible. Seth's stomach tightened. He didn't move at first. Picking her up would complicate everything: registry scans, berth audits, crew rosters. He had exactly enough credits left for docking fees, not for med clearance or new manifest entries. Still, she was freezing to death on clean pavement while people stepped around her like she wasn't real. And something in him, something that had gone silent after the war, snapped back awake. He pulled off his weather cloak. The inner fabric was still warm from his body. He crouched and wrapped it around her shoulders. The moment the heat touched her skin, steam rose. Her eyes flicked to his face, amber, wide, dazed. She flinched like she expected a blow. "Don't," she rasped. Her voice cracked dry. "I'm not," he said. His tone stayed level, calm by design. He slid an arm behind her back, another under her legs, and lifted. She was shockingly light. Bones. Cold. A street vendor watched as Seth carried her across the concourse. The man's gaze landed on her bare feet under the cloak, then darted away. Unregistered meant trouble, and nobody wanted trouble. Seth felt the tension coil between his shoulder blades as he moved through the scanner gate. He kept his posture straight, not rushing, not slowing. The sensors blinked green. They didn't register her at all. His mind stayed ahead of his steps, running logistics like a checklist. Medical wing? No. Disposals ward would tag her for termination. Registry office? No record meant detention. Leaving her? Not an option. He turned into a side row lined with vending stalls. One sold basic clothing. The vendor's expression hardened as Seth approached with a bundle in his arms. "No returns," the man said flatly. "I won't," Seth answered. He scanned the racks fast. Thermal tunic. Undersleeves. A translucent mesh skirt. Lighter than it looked, meant for climate control, not function. The vendor raised an eyebrow at that. "She'll ruin it in an hour," he said. "Then I'll wash it," Seth said, and set down the last of his ration credits. The vendor frowned at the amount, then slid a thin scarf across the counter without comment. Seth carried her to a maintenance bench out of the wind and set her down. She moved her fingers stiffly, pulling the tunic over her arms with trembling effort. her breathing steadied by degrees as the heat fabric activated. She wrapped the mesh skirt around her hips, the fibers catching faint light. It was too fine for this place, and that was the point. She said nothing until she was dressed. Then, soft but clear, why? He checked the corridor before answering. Because you were cold. Her gaze stayed locked on him, searching for the catch. Finding none, he lifted her again and headed for Dock 17C. The sable finch waited in its berth, matte black, plating damp with condensation. Ramp down and lights low. Seth keyed the panel. The ramp lowered, releasing warm, filtered air and the faint smell of citrus cleanser. The woman's shoulders eased. Inside, the ship was narrow but spotless. No clutter. Tools lined up by size on magnetic strips. Manifest screens dimmed. It smelled like steel and order. He set her on the padded bench beside a heater grill. The coils glowed dull red. He crouched, checked her feet. Skin raw but intact. Frostbitten at the edges. Treatable. You'll need water, he said. She nodded once, wary. He poured from the galley dispenser and gave her the cup. Her hand shook, then steadied after a few sips. My name's Seth Draven, he said. I run cargo. Independent contract. This ship is mine. She hesitated, then, Nary. All right, Nary, he said. You'll stay here tonight. Then decide. She glanced around again, gaze tracing the bolted panels, the locked cabin door, the ordered tools. No chaos. No signs of other people. He didn't live like a man who wanted company. He lived like a man who refused weakness. Yet he had stopped and carried her and spent everything he had on her clothes. She lowered her eyes to the floor heater, toes curling toward the warmth, and for the first time her breathing evened out. Seth watched her a moment longer, then keyed the console to lock the ramp. His hands were steady. His pulse wasn't. She had no registry, no past he could verify, no reason for him to get involved. But she was here now, on his ship, and for tonight, that made her his responsibility. And Seth Draven never left things unfinished. The sable finch stayed quiet through the station's artificial night cycle. Dim amber strips glowed along the floor while the ventilation hummed low. Seth stayed at the galley counter, arms folded, watching Nary from the corner of his eye as she sat by the heater on the bench. Her eyes followed the software of the air filters, scanning the ship's walls like she was mapping every bolt and seam. He realized she hadn't asked where she was or who he was. No panic, no gratitude, just cautious calculation behind her stillness. That worried him more than fear would have. You can sleep in the cabin, he said. Her gaze shifted to the sealed cabin door. The hesitation was quick but sharp, like a flash of old pain. Is it locked? Only if you want it to be, he answered. The ship's door seals can be set from the inside. That made her sit a little straighter. Show me. Seth stood and crossed the narrow corridor. He tapped the side console. The lock responded with a clean click, then another. Inside, you press here. It cuts external access, including mine. You hold the override if you want to leave. Nary's amber eyes held his. So, if I go in there, you stay out. Yes, Seth said simply. That seemed to land heavier than anything he'd said so far. Her shoulders eased. Not much, but enough. She rose from the bench with slow care, still barefoot. He noticed her legs shake faintly from exhaustion. He resisted the urge to steady her. Touch still made her flinch. She walked into the cabin, scanned the small space. A single bunk, folded gray blanket, clean flooring, a wall panel showing steady life support readouts. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and metal polish. This is yours, she said. It was he said. I don't use it when I have cargo. I sleep at the console. Her brow furrowed. You don't bring people here often. Never, he said. The silence after that stretched. It wasn't hostile, just heavy. Nary stepped back out of the cabin and stood in the corridor facing him. Why were you even down there? Seth paused. He hadn't expected her to ask. Dockmaster shifted my delivery queue forward. Empty hold. Nothing to do for 12 hours. You came down to watch people. I came down to remember why I don't live among them. Nary studied his face, then gave a small nod like she understood more than she said. She sat again by the heater. The mesh skirt glittered faintly in the dim light as she drew her knees close. What happens if station patrols come here? What if they scan me? They won't, Seth said. This base flagged as low traffic. No patrol unless someone files a complaint. And if they do, then I fly, he said, voice calm but firm. Her eyes searched his for signs of bluff. She found none. Do you want to leave this place? He asked after a moment. Neri's answer took time. I wanted to die there, she said, voice quiet, matter of fact. But it was slow. So, now I want something else. I don't know what yet. Seth accepted that without reaction. She wasn't saying it to provoke pity. She was stating inventory. He brought her a small metal case from the med kit. For frostbite. She hesitated, then extended her feet. The skin was cracked at the edges, mottled white, fading to red. He opened the salve, warming it between his palms before applying it with slow, careful pressure. Her muscles tightened at the first touch, then gradually released. Why are your hands steady? She asked. Because I decide when they're not, he said. She stared at him for a long moment, then said nothing. When he finished, he stood and washed his hands at the galley sink. She sat still, legs stretched toward the heater, watching the salve sink into her skin. Are you going to ask what I am? She asked finally. No, he said. Why not? Because you're here, Seth said. That's enough for now. Her lips parted like she might argue. Then she closed them again. He moved to the console, checking the Finch's systems. Fuel cells at 70%, oxygen stable, cargo bays empty, manifest logs locked. The numbers steadied him. Numbers always did. Neri laid down on the bench near the heater, pulling the thermal tunic close around her body. If I sleep, she said without looking at him, and you try something, I won't. He cut in calm certain. Her eyes flicked to his. She measured his tone like weighing a blade's edge. Then she turned her face toward the wall and closed her eyes. Seth dimmed the corridor lights, sat back at the console, and watched the soft rise and fall of her breathing. She was asleep within minutes, fully, deeply, like someone whose body had been running on nothing but will. Only then did he let his own tension bleed out of his shoulders. He hadn't planned this. He never let variables onto his ship. But something about leaving her on that floor had felt like setting down a live charge in his chest and walking away. He set a silent proximity alarm on the console, then leaned back in the chair. The Finch hummed steady around them, warm air circulating through narrow vents, the smell of citrus cloth fading into night cycle neutral. Seth kept his eyes on her until he was sure her breathing stayed even. Then, for the first time in months, he let himself close his eyes. Artificial morning came slowly aboard the Sable Finch. The overhead strips brightened in gentle steps, shifting from dim amber to cold white. Seth stirred in his chair at the console, muscles stiff from sleeping upright. The proximity alarm blinked quietly, no intrusions. The ship had stayed silent through the night. Neri was still asleep on the bench by the heater, curled on her side, the thermal tunic bunched around her shoulders. The mesh skirt had slipped low on her hips during the night. Her bare feet were close to the coils, skin no longer pale, but flushed with new warmth. She didn't look fragile now, just exhausted. Seth rose quietly and crossed to the galley. He pressed a mug of Frolen seed coffee and set a pan on the induction plate. The familiar routine steadied his thoughts. As he cracked open the rations crate, he caught himself glancing back at her. He hadn't heard her speak much, but even silence had a weight. Last night it had been fear. Now it was something else, watchfulness. Maybe. She stirred as the smell of hot coffee filled the air. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. Amber irises sharp even when half awake. She blinked, focused on him, and pushed herself upright. Her hair hung in loose, damp strands around her face. Where am I? She asked, voice hoarse but clearer than last night. My ship, Seth said, docked in Bay 17C, lower ring of Sorella Spire. Her brow furrowed. Why did you bring me here instead of handing me to station control? Because they'd put you in disposal intake, Seth said. His tone stayed calm, but his jaw tightened. You were half frozen. They wouldn't have bothered thawing you. Neri stared at the floor for a long second. Her fingers curled in the hem of the tunic like she needed to anchor herself. What do you want from me, then? She asked without looking up. Nothing, Seth said. He slid a plate onto the table, fried Draxon mushrooms, a slice of Kirill grain bread, a small cup of larnberry porridge. Eat. You'll think clearer after. She watched the steam rise off the food, suspicion and hunger colliding in her eyes. She moved to the table with slow, wary steps, sat opposite him, and picked up the fork. Her hands didn't shake this time. They ate in silence for several minutes. The galley was narrow. Their knees almost touched under the table. Seth kept his eyes on his plate, but tracked her movements out of the corner of his vision. She ate like someone who had once known proper meals, but hadn't had one in a long time. Controlled, careful, but fast once the taste hit her tongue. "Why are you alone here?" she asked suddenly. "I like quiet," Seth said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got," he replied. She gave a small, humorless laugh and set her fork down. "You move like military." "I was," he said. "Logistics division. War ended 6 years ago. I left before the courts started assigning blame." "Did you fight?" "No," Seth said. "I made sure the people who did got their bullets and their rations on time." "That's worse," she muttered, not accusing, just stating it. "I know," he said, and drank his coffee. She studied him like she was trying to fit the image together. The perfect order of the ship, his steady hands, the way he never raised his voice. It didn't line up with someone who would risk everything for a stranger. "You saw my marker," she said. "You knew I was unregistered." "Yes. You could still get fined. Maybe lose your berth." "Maybe," Seth said, unfazed. "Why do it then?" He met her eyes finally. "Because you were cold, and I don't leave people on the floor." Her expression shifted, something between disbelief and reluctant respect. She looked away first. She finished her plate and sat back, hands folded in her lap. The color had returned to her face. The sharp, brittle tension in her frame was easing, though not gone. "Are you planning to keep me here?" she asked. "No," Seth said. "That's not my choice. You'll decide that. What if I decide to leave? Then you walk out that ramp. No questions. And if I stay, then we figure out what staying looks like." Neri considered that. The answer seemed to unsettle her more than any threat would have. Seth stood, cleared the plates, and returned with a folded dark shirt from the storage locker. He sat on the bench near her. For when the station drops temperature, thermal linings intact. She lifted it, thumb brushing the collar. "This is yours." "It's clean," he said simply. Her mouth twitched, close to a smile, but not quite. She pressed the shirt to her chest for a moment before laying it across her lap. "Where did you come from?" Seth asked quietly. It was the first personal question he'd risked. Neri's face went still, her gaze unfocused for a second, like she had to choose which parts of the truth to speak. "Outer Ring Station," she said finally. "Cargo indenture. 5 years. When the overseers stopped paying wages, they stopped paying air rations too. Most of us left the dorms. Some didn't. Anyone left who'd look for you?" "No," she said, tone flat. "No one who'd care if they found me." That settled something for Seth, not in a comforting way, but as a known variable. No search parties, no claims, no ties. He turned back to the console. "Then you're clear," he said. "As far as this ship is concerned, you're just another passenger who hasn't signed on yet." Neri watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, pulled the dark shirt over her head, and rolled the sleeves twice until her hand showed. It hung loose on her, warm and soft. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll stay one more night." Seth nodded once, not looking at her, but his grip on the console edge eased. The sable finch hummed steady around them. Outside, the city's docking rail traffic began to rise, faint vibrations passing through the hull. Inside, the air stayed warm and still, like the ship itself was holding its breath. The ship settled into the quiet rhythm of Sorella Spire's artificial afternoon. The distant hum of docking trams pulsed faintly through the hull, while the sable finch stayed still, lights low, air warm. Seth worked at the system's console, scrolling through job listings, while Neri sat cross-legged on the bench by the heater, wearing his dark shirt over her tunic, the mesh skirt barely visible beneath. Her hair was still damp from the washroom, falling in loose dark strands over her shoulders. She watched the screen's glow reflect across his face, but her eyes were distant, fixed on something far behind it. Are you just going to keep drifting between jobs? She asked quietly. Seth didn't look up until the ships paid off. After that, maybe stay mobile. No station long enough to get caught in its rules. Always alone. That's the plan, he said, and logged another rejected bid. Neri frowned. How long have you been doing this? 3 years, Seth said. Since I left the Federation's logistics corps. You walked away from a stable post. Why? He hesitated, hands still over the console keys. It wasn't a question most people risked asking, and not one he liked answering. But she deserved more than silence if he expected her trust. Because I was good at it, he said finally. Too good. The system kept pushing me higher, giving me more control, more reach. And the further I got from the ground, the less I saw the people. It was just tonnage and throughput and losses per quarter. I woke up one day realizing I hadn't said a human name out loud in 6 months. Only numbers. Neri stayed quiet for a long moment, eyes steady on him. So you walked away to find something real, she said, not as a question. Seth gave a slight shrug. Or just something small enough I could carry without it killing me. She absorbed that, then looked away. The air between them settled heavier, but not cold. Her tone shifted. And you're not worried having me here could undo all that careful distance you built? Seth's jaw flexed. It crossed my mind. And yet I'm still here, she said softly. That was a choice, he replied. So is keeping you here. She watched him for a long beat, then gave the smallest nod, acknowledgement, not surrender. They lapsed into quiet. The station's traffic vibrations faded as the shift turnover passed. Seth stood, crossing to the lockers built into the bulkhead. He keyed one open and pulled down a narrow storage crate. Inside were spare thermal wraps, ration packs, and a small metal case marked with faded Federation issue codes. He caught her eyes flick toward it. You kept something from a war, she said. He set the case down on the table and opened it. Inside lay a short, thick data wafer and a small strip of worn photographs tucked under its clasp. One showed 5 younger men and women in Federation logistics coveralls standing in front of a cargo crawler. Seth was in the center, thinner, smiling faintly. Dead? Neri asked quietly. 2 confirmed. The others disappeared when the tribunal started clearing records, he said, his tone flat, controlled. Do you ever talk to anyone from that time? No, he said. He closed the case gently. No one wants to remember they existed. Neri didn't respond. She sat straighter, but her hands clasped tighter in her lap. He noticed, and for once didn't let it slide. And you? She blinked. You said the overseer stopped paying wages. What happened to the others? Her eyes locked on the heater coils, glowing dull orange. Her voice thinned. The ones who couldn't bribe their way off the dorm registry died slow. No rations, no medical. You could hear them coughing through the walls until they didn't anymore. I ran. How did you get here? A freighter, she said. Hid in the storage bay under the heat vent. Didn't move for 2 days. Got off when it docked here. Walked until I couldn't. Seth nodded slowly. That answered one of the questions he had left unspoken since last night. How someone could end up half dead on the concourse without anyone noticing. It also told him something else. She hadn't been discarded by chance. She had chosen to survive and paid for it with everything. She seemed to read that thought on his face. I didn't crawl here to be saved, she said, her tone quiet but sharp. Good, Seth said. I'm not here to save you. That disarmed her more than sympathy would have. Her shoulders eased. He pushed the crate back into the locker, sealing it. You can walk out whenever you want. But if you stay, you need to know what this ship is. What is it? A place that doesn't care what you were, he said. Only what you do next. Neri stared at him, expression unreadable, then nodded once. Seth returned to the galley and began sorting a small tray of tools. Routine maintenance to occupy his hands. Neri watched him a moment longer, then rose and wandered the corridor slowly, touching bulkheads with her fingertips, studying every latch and panel like she was memorizing the ship's skeleton. She stopped at the sealed door to the cabin, hesitated, then keyed it open and stepped inside. Seth heard the soft click as she sealed it from within. He didn't follow. He sat alone in the galley's quiet for several minutes, hands still over the tools. Then he let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For the first time since Sorella Spire, he let himself hope she might not leave in the morning. The sable finch drifted in its berth while the city outside brightened into simulated morning. Dock alarms sounded faintly across the bay as new haulers came in on rotation. Inside, the air was warm and still, carrying the faint smell of metal polish and dried citrus cloth. Seth had been awake for an hour, moving silently around the galley. He'd run diagnostics, checked oxygen balances, then started preparing breakfast with mechanical precision. The rhythm steadied his mind. He wasn't used to another presence breathing in the same air as him, and her silence from behind the closed cabin door gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. When the door slid open, she stepped out barefoot, wearing the dark shirt he'd given her over the mesh skirt, sleeves rolled twice to her forearms. Her hair was combed back now, still damp, falling in a clean black line down her spine. The sight of her steady on her feet made something tighten in his chest. Relief mixed with an instinctive readiness, as if seeing her stable made it easier to drop his guard without meaning to. She stopped near the galley table, eyes on the steaming mugs. "You get up early." "I always do," Seth said. He slid a plate toward her. Varan root hash, Kirill bread, Frolin seed coffee. "Eat slow. Your stomach's not ready for heavy rations." Neri sat, posture straight, eyes tracking his movements with quiet focus. She ate cautiously at first, then with more certainty, each bite restoring a little more life to her face. After a few minutes, she spoke without looking up. "What's the Finch's range?" 4 jumps without resupply, Seth said. 6 if I cut heating. Cargo max, 40 metric. Mostly run trade goods between the mid-rings and outer stations. Low risk, low profit. "So you choose safe work," she said. "I choose controllable work," he corrected. "Safety's an illusion. Control isn't." She gave a short nod at that, as if she understood exactly what he meant. "Where would you go?" she asked, "if you stopped running jobs?" The question caught him off balance. He paused, hand still on the console edge. "Haven't decided," he said. "Or you don't think you deserve to," she said softly. Seth's eyes lifted to hers. Her expression was neutral, but there was no malice in it. Only observation. He didn't answer. Neri set her fork down, then leaned back on a bench. "You should know something," she said. "I wasn't born on that station I told you about. I was taken there. 8 years old. My parents sold me into labor contracts for transport credits." Seth stayed still, but the words landed sharp. "How long were you under contract?" 5 years listed, she said. 7 in practice. They stopped tracking the last 2. "You escaped," he said. "I stopped asking permission," she replied. Silence settled for a moment. Not heavy, just steady. It explained more than she probably realized. Her wariness, the way she mapped rooms for exits before speaking, the habit of making herself small when she stopped moving. She hadn't just survived hardship. She had been shaped around it. "You should know something too," Seth said, voice low. "I didn't bring you here out of pity. I did it because you were still trying to stay alive. I don't waste effort on people who've already quit." Neri's gaze sharpened, locked on his. She held a long moment, then gave one short nod. It was small, but it carried weight, acknowledgement of respect, not charity. After they finished eating, Seth rose and opened the maintenance locker. "If you're staying another day, you should know the Finch. Start small. Life support systems." Neri blinked, caught off guard. "You're going to train me?" "Not train," he said. "Show. You learn fast, or you wouldn't be here." Her mouth curved, just faintly but real. "All right." They moved through the ship slowly. Seth showed her the primary filtration cores behind the aft wall panel, the humidity regulators along the corridor ceiling, the emergency oxygen bypass valves. She asked few questions, but her eyes tracked everything. Her fingers stayed close to the walls, as if memorizing the shape of them through her skin. When they returned to the galley, she stood a little taller. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect? A man who saves someone so he can own them." Seth leaned on the console. "If I wanted someone I could control, I'd buy an NAV drone. They're cheaper and don't argue." Her lips pulled into a quick, startled laugh. Barely there, gone almost as soon as it appeared. But her eyes stayed warmer after that. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like space neither of them minded sharing. The afternoon cycle dimmed slowly across the sable Finch's interior, the ship's lights softening into a warm, neutral glow. The outside hum of Sorella Spire's docking trams faded as traffic thinned, leaving a faint vibration through the floor plating that rose and fell like the ship's own breathing. Seth stood at the engineering console, reviewing system logs. Neri sat on the bench beside the heater, his dark shirt hanging loose over a mesh skirt, bare legs tucked under her, eyes following him in silence. The quiet wasn't hostile anymore. It was layered with something unspoken, cautious, but no longer defensive. Seth broke it first. You memorized half the ship's systems in an hour. Neri's gaze didn't waver. Survival trains focus. He nodded. It wasn't bragging. It was fact. She tilted her head. You never asked what I want to do next. Because you haven't decided yet, he said. That earned a small, genuine smile. It passed quickly, but it reached her eyes. People don't usually wait for me to decide anything, she said. I'm not most people, Seth replied, and meant it. She looked away, toward the sealed cabin door, then back at him. If I wanted to leave this ship, not today, but later, would you let me? I wouldn't stop you, he said simply, but I wouldn't push you out either. Neri studied his face as if testing for cracks, for the familiar edge of ownership she'd learned to expect from people. She didn't find it. Most men want something back, she said quietly. I'm not owed anything, Seth answered. His tone stayed level, but his hands tightened briefly on the console frame before he let go. Neri's shoulders eased a little, but her voice stayed low. That's hard to believe. Doesn't have to be, he said. For a while, the only sound was the steady hiss of the ventilation fans. Then Seth moved to the storage rack and pulled down a small tin from the med kit. He opened it on the table, a mild dermal salve used for frost damage. Your feet. Let me see them. Her body stiffened on instinct. She glanced down at her toes, curled against the heater grill. Her voice came guarded. I can do it myself. I know, Seth said. I'm offering, not ordering. Something subtle shifted in her eyes. Hesitation, then choice. She extended her legs slowly, laying them across the bench. He crouched in front of her, resting the tin on the floor. He warmed the salve between his palms before touching her. The contact was steady, measured, almost clinical at first. His thumbs traced the cracked skin gently, working the balm in with slow, even pressure. Neri's breath hitched on the first touch, but she didn't pull back. Her eyes stayed locked on his face, searching for a hint of aggression, of intent. There was none, only quiet concentration. Her muscles gradually loosened under his hands. She let her head tilt back against the bulkhead, eyelids half lowering. You've done this before, she murmured. Field medic rotation, he said. War days, mostly frostbite and burns. Did you care about the people? Yes, Seth said. His tone didn't change. That was the problem. Neri's gaze lingered on him, sharp but softer than before. When he finished, he wiped his hands and resealed the tin. You'll walk easier tomorrow, he said. Thank you, she said quietly, surprising them both. Seth stood, giving her space. She pulled her legs back under her, toes flexing against the warmth. Do you trust me yet? She asked suddenly. He faced her, expression unreadable. Not yet. Do you trust me? Not yet, she echoed. Good, he said. We're even. Neri's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile exactly. More like the ghost of one trying to return after years of disuse. Seth turned back to the console and keyed through the docking job listings. The screen's glow lit the edge of his jaw. You don't ask many questions, Neri said after a moment. I'll ask when you're ready to answer, he replied. That's not how most people work. That's why I work alone, he said. Neri's eyes flicked around the ship again. Clean panels, ordered tools, no stray clothes, no evidence of any life but his. She understood then, the silence wasn't habit. It was armor. She stood slowly, crossing to the viewport. Beyond the glass, the city hung like a suspended grid of chrome and light against the gas giant's swirling turquoise clouds. Cargo skiffs glided along rails, bright engines cutting lines through the fog. I thought it would feel bigger, she said quietly. It does, Seth said from behind her, until you stay long enough to see how small it really is. Neri's reflection met his in the viewport. Their eyes held there a moment, suspended in the glass. Then she turned back toward him, barefoot steps silent on the metal deck. You said if I stayed, we'd figure out what that meant, she said. I did, Seth said. Then start figuring. He let the words hang between them for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slow and deliberate. Tomorrow, he said, we plot a route. Neri's shoulders straightened, as if something inside her finally stopped bracing for impact. For the first time since she'd stepped aboard, she didn't look like she might vanish. The following morning's cycle began in silence, only the soft click of power relays rising as the Finch's systems woke. Pale light washed through the corridor strips. Seth was already moving, boots quiet on the deck as he stowed tools from the night's diagnostics. The ship smelled faintly of brewed Ferland seed coffee, metal polish, and warm recycled air. The scent of something kept meticulously under control. Neri emerged from the cabin without a sound, the mesh skirt shifting gently over her legs, his dark shirt still loose on her shoulders. Her hair had dried into a straight black curtain down her back. Her face looked different, less hollow, more present. You sleep? Seth asked without looking up from the NAV console. Yes, she said, first time in months without waking. He gave a small grunt, the closest he ever came to approval. That's good. Neri stepped closer, eyes moving across the screens. You said we'd plot a route today. We will, he said. He tapped through open contracts, low-pay freight runs, minor courier jobs, nothing dangerous. We'll pick something short, close enough you can come back if you hate it. She studied his tone, then the screen. You're testing me. I'm showing you what staying means, he corrected. It's not hiding. It's work. Routine. This ship moves or dies. Neri folded her arms lightly across her stomach, considering. What happens if they scan me on departure? Seth turned, meeting her eyes. They won't. Manifest won't show a passenger. If they ping, I list you as crew in training. No one checks that twice unless they want to do paperwork. No one here wants paperwork. Wouldn't that link me to you? Yes, he said simply. That doesn't worry you? It should, Seth said. It doesn't. Something flickered in her eyes, caution colliding with something more complicated. She glanced away, breaking the look first. He keyed off the screen and pushed away from the console. Before any route, you learn the startup checks. Engines don't light unless I trust you near them. Neri followed him to the rear bay where the Finch's twin ion cores rested behind armored panels. He unlocked the service housing and showed her the priming sequence. Pressure checks, fuel cell readouts, thermal bleed valves. His instructions were clipped and precise, but never condescending. She matched his pace without hesitation, fingers steady as she repeated each step back to him. You teach like you expect me to understand, she said quietly. I do, he said. No one ever has. Then they were wasting your time, Seth replied. Neri's hands paused over the panel. She looked at him like she was weighing whether to believe that. Her voice came softer. I don't know how to be part of something, not without waiting for it to break. Seth held her gaze. Then don't wait. Help hold it up. Her jaw tightened, like she was swallowing an answer that scared her more than refusing would. But she nodded once and returned to the panel without another word. They spent the next 2 hours running checks through the Finch's systems. Neri's focus never faltered. Seth found himself watching her more than the readouts. How quickly her eyes tracked values. How she absorbed new routines like she was starving for them. By the time they finished, her skin carried a light sheen of sweat, and her shoulders had squared unconsciously. They returned to the galley. Seth brewed another round of coffee and handed her a mug. She wrapped her hands around it, soaking in the heat. Is this what you do every day? She asked. Yes, he said. Order keeps the ship alive. Chaos kills faster than vacuum. She looked around. The spotless tools, the perfectly stowed supplies, the absence of clutter or distraction. Then why risk bringing me here? Seth leaned on the counter, eyes steady on her. Because I'd rather risk the ship than let someone freeze to death while everyone pretends not to see her. Neri blinked once, as if the words hit harder than she wanted to show. She stared into her mug. Her voice came lower. No one's ever said something like that to me and meant it. I don't say things I don't mean, Seth said. The silence that followed wasn't tense this time. It felt heavy in a different way, like ground shifting underfoot. Neri set down the mug, rising from the bench. She crossed the narrow space to stand in front of him, close enough that the warmth off her skin cut through the ship's filtered air. "If I stay," she said, steady and quiet, "I need to know this isn't pity." "It's not," Seth said, just as steady. "Then what is it?" His eyes stayed on hers, unwavering. "It's choice." Neri drew a slow breath, shoulders lifting, then letting go. Something long-locked behind her gaze loosened. She stepped back just slightly, not retreating, just breathing room, and returned to the bench. She pulled her knees up and watched him as he cleaned their mugs. For the first time since she had crawled off that freezing concourse floor, she didn't look like she was planning her escape. She looked like she might be planning to stay. The next station day began with a low, distant tremor as cargo trams rumbled through the upper rails, rattling faint vibrations down the berth walls. Inside the Sable Finch, the lights shifted from muted amber to a soft daylight hue, illuminating the narrow corridors and clean steel panels with gentle precision. Seth was already awake. He stood at the console in the galley, leaning on one arm, scanning departure permits. The ship's engines were still on standby, their quiet hum layered beneath the ventilation hiss. He hadn't shaved. The dark stubble along his jaw matched the half-shadowed circles under his eyes, but he looked steady, focused. Neri came out of the cabin barefoot, her steps soundless on the deck. She wore the black shirt he had given her, rolled at the forearms, and a mesh skirt that caught faint shards of light as she moved. Her hair fell in a smooth, dark line down her back. She paused at the galley threshold, watching him with that guarded stillness she carried like an instinct. But there was less tension in it now, more watchfulness than fear. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "A little," Seth said. "Didn't need much." She crossed to the table and sat, pulling her legs under her. "You keep everything too clean," she said. "It's easier to see what's broken," he replied. Neri gave a small nod, as if that made sense to her in a way nothing else had. Seth keyed off the console and turned to face her fully. "We're taking a short run. Courier contract to the supply depot on Kale Dock 9. Close range. No inspections. If you're going to be listed on my manifest, this is the time to do it." Her body went very still. "Listed," she repeated. "Crew in training," he said. "It's just a box to tick. Gets you past station gates and jump checkpoints. Without it, any random sweep flags you. With it, you're invisible again, but this time by choice." Neri's eyes narrowed slightly. "It links me to you." "Yes," Seth said. "And if someone from before sees it, they won't," he said, tone certain, not defensive. "No one looks at dockworker manifests unless there's an incident. We won't give them one." Neri studied his face as if looking for hesitation, but his expression stayed level, calm, and absolute. "What happens if I leave later?" she asked. "Then we delete the listing," Seth said. "The system won't keep a trace. You walk clean." Her fingers tapped once on the tabletop, slow and deliberate, then stilled. "And you're not afraid I'll ruin your clean record?" "I'm not afraid of you," Seth said. She looked down at the table, then up at him again, something taut flickering behind her eyes and breaking. "Then do it," she said. "List me." Seth keyed the manifest panel. The screen cast white light across his hands as he opened a new crew slot. "Full name," he said quietly. Neri hesitated, then said, "Neri Saren." He typed it in, fingers precise. The system blinked, processed, and confirmed the entry with a soft tone. She exhaled almost soundlessly. The tension in her shoulders eased, but not completely. "That's the first time my name has meant anything in years," she said. "It means something here," Seth said. Neri's gaze met his and held. He moved around her to the storage racks, pulling down a folded gray jumpsuit marked with the Finch's registry emblem on the shoulder. He sat on the bench beside her. "Crew uniform. Wear it during departure. It's not for me. It's so no one questions you." Neri touched the fabric cautiously, then picked it up. "You trust me not to disappear with your ship in the middle of the jump," she said, half serious. "If you can fly it without me, you deserve it," Seth said. Her lips curved faintly, not a smile but close. She stood and carried the jumpsuit into the cabin. The door hissed shut. Seth stood alone in the galley, hands braced on the counter, staring at the manifest screen. For the first time since bringing her aboard, he let the weight of the choice register in his body. It didn't feel like a risk. It felt like a turning point. Minutes later, Neri emerged. The jumpsuit fit loosely but cleanly on her frame, cinched at the waist, collar slightly open to reveal the edge of her collarbone. Her dark hair contrasted sharply against the gray fabric, making her look sharper, more deliberate, like someone with a place. Seth's expression didn't change, but his eyes stayed on her a moment longer than necessary. "Looks right," he said. She stepped closer, boots still absent, and planted her hands on the table between them. "So what happens after KL Doc 9? "That depends on you," Seth said. "You can walk away with clean papers, or you can keep going." Neri watched him silently for several seconds. Then, "I don't want to be invisible anymore." "You're not," Seth said quietly. Her throat moved on a small swallow. She straightened, pulling the zipper halfway up her jumpsuit, and nodded. They moved through departure procedures together. Seth handled the port clearances while Neri double-checked the engine warm-up cycle, her hands steady over the controls. The engines came alive with a deep hum that trembled through the deck. When the Finch finally detached from the berth, the view through the forward viewport opened wide. The grid of Sorella Spire sliding away behind them, and beyond that, the endless turquoise swirls of the gas giant below. Neri stood at Seth's side, watching the city shrink. "You ever get used to leaving?" she asked. "No," Seth said. "That's how you know it matters." She stayed quiet, but the faint reflection of her face in the viewport showed her lips curve, slow and almost disbelieving. As the Finch's engines pushed them clear of the station, Seth checked the NAV readout and reached over to toggle the internal lock, sealing the ship. The sound of the bolts engaging echoed through the corridor. Neri glanced at him. "What's that for?" "So, he said, there's no way back out there until we decide to open it." She stared at him a long moment. Then she nodded. For the first time, she wasn't graced like someone waiting to be thrown away. She stood steady on his deck, eyes on the stars ahead. And for the first time, she truly looked like she belonged here.